Good afternoon.
Well, you're a lawyer, so you know that sometimes brevity is the best way to proceed.
But I'm also a.
You can make your point.
But I'm also a politician, and my son tells me I speak too much.
And that's just the opposite. Brevity.
So we'll try to strike a happy medium. Good afternoon. My name is John Murtaugh. I'm a resident of Yonkers, New York. And I do want to emphasize, first of all, that I am here today strictly as a private citizen. None of my comments should be construed as the opinion of the Yonkers City Council, the Republican caucus of that council, and certainly not the City of Yonkers itself. I speak merely as a resident of Yonkers in Westchester County. The law that is before you, I can't put it any more plainly, is wholly unnecessary. The very subject that you seek to regulate is already regulated by both state and federal law. Indeed, your own legislative findings state that your statute is modeled on the applicable federal statute. I might note that I speak to that with some experience because some 10 years ago, your predecessors proposed almost identical legislation, and I was the attorney who, on behalf of a client, challenged it on that very basis. It was preempted by state and federal law. So while sometimes imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, in this case, I'm afraid it is simply repetitive, unnecessary, and unduly burdensome both to the citizens of Westchester and, I submit, ultimately to our court system. Someone last month described this proposal as a solution looking for a problem. And that is true in a couple of ways. First of all, as a resident of this county for 35 years, I would submit that there is really no documented history of violence at clinics in Westchester County. And in the unlikely event that such were to occur, such incidents are already more than addressed by state and federal law and any number of other existing statutes. Harassment is already a crime under our penal code. Assault and battery are already crimes under our penal code. Trespass is already a crime under our penal code. There is, in fact, no activity described in your proposed statute that is not already fully addressed by existing law. Legislator Ryan last month expressed concern over photos that appeared to show a particularly crowded sidewalk outside of an office building on South Broadway in Yonkers. First, let me note that the building in question sits directly next door to City Hall in Yonkers, so I'm a little familiar with the area. Additionally, I maintained my own law office 2 blocks from that location for 5 years, from 2005 until 2010. As a result, I pass by that site, if not daily, then at least several times every week. Often, I would see Mr. Felicissimo and his students standing quietly outside of the building. Never once did I see anyone have difficulty traversing the sidewalk or entering or exiting the building. In any event, even if a large protest were to occur, I have every confidence that the Yonkers Police Department is fully capable of controlling a crowd under existing law. And I might add that the sudden concern of this body, which has never seen fit in the past to pass laws due to a concern about, for example, union protests in the streets of White Plains outside this building, environmental protests at the gates of Indian Point, or any other number of legitimate First Amendment exercises. Why suddenly does this body find itself compelled to take action to control a crowd on the streets of Yonkers? While we thank you for your newfound concern for our city, let me assure you that the men and women of the government of the City of Yonkers are more than capable of policing crowds in our downtown. And incidentally, last month I heard mention that previous witnesses had stated, or at least suggested, that the Yonkers Police Department have failed to take action in the face of protests. Well, the men and women of the Yonkers Police Department, America's finest police department, do not need me to defend them. But, as a representative of the city, I will go on record as condemning what I could only describe as an outrageous and malicious slander. The suggestion that for political or any other reasons, our mayor, our police commissioner, or any individual officer of the City of Yonkers would fail in their duty to uphold the law and protect the people is outrageous. Finally, I must address the so-called private right of action which this statute purports to create. And again, I speak to it with some degree of authority. Approximately a decade ago, I was asked on a pro bono basis to defend the First Amendment rights of a gentleman named John Murphy. Murphy was already in his mid-70s at the time, and in his retirement, he filled his days by standing on the sidewalk outside a medical facility in Garden City and quietly praying the rosary. Murphy did not protest, he did not hand out literature, he did not speak to people entering or exiting the building. He merely stood, or sometimes knelt on the sidewalk, and prayed. The proprietor of that particular clinic, Dr. Moshe Hakamovich, finally called the police and had Murphy arrested. No sooner was he in front of the Nassau County judge than the charges were dismissed and the judge declared that he had a constitutional right to pray. Dr. Hakamovich had him arrested again. The judge threw out the charges again. Dr. Hakamovich had Murphy arrested a third time. The judge likewise dismissed the third set of charges as well. Finally, Dr. Hakamovich retained a large New York law firm, Schulte, Roth, and Zabel, to file a federal civil lawsuit against Murphy. The suit claimed a host of wrongs, from trespass to interference with business, and sought millions of dollars in damages. The goal was obvious: to bankrupt Murphy and intimidate him and those who shared his beliefs. I won't bore you with the details of over a year of litigation, discovery, and depositions, but suffice it to say, after clogging the courts for more than a year, on the eve of trial, the case was settled. The settlement? All claims by the clinic against Murphy were dropped, and Dr. Hakamovich ended up paying Murphy for wrongful arrest, malicious prosecution, and abuse of process. The private right of action you purport to create here would similarly lead to nothing but abusive and vexatious litigation, which would only clog our already overburdened courts. The standard for seeking relief which you propose is wholly subjective, requires no showing of objective harm or reasonableness, and would only serve to invite, ironically, harassment of those who would legitimately exercise their First Amendment rights. A final note: Dr. Hakamovich, he who sued Murphy, Dr. Hakamovich may still live right here in Scarsdale. Was in fact, at the time, the proprietor of the clinic around the corner here on White Plains, on Mamaroneck Avenue in White Plains. He also had clinics in the Bronx, Arizona, and Texas. About the time that he sued Murphy, Dr. Hakamovich, who was popularly known as Dr. Hack, was in court in other cases as well. In closing, I'm just going to share with you, because I think it's important to understand who it is this body would be defending. I'll share with you an article from the Lubbock, Texas Journal. Phoenix, a New York physician under investigation in the death of a patient at his Phoenix clinic, is no stranger to malpractice suits. Dr. Moshe Hakamovich, owner of the now-closed AZ Women's Center and other troubled abortion clinics in New York and Texas, has been named in at least 28 lawsuits claiming negligence. Hakamovich, 62, is also being investigated by the Maricopa County Attorney's Office. He also faces a state medical board probe and a lawsuit by the family of Lou Ann Herron, the woman who died in April 1998 at his clinic. An autopsy found that Herron, 33, suffered a ruptured uterus during a late-term abortion. Police say paramedics found her lying on blood-drenched sheets, apparently dead for some time. The Republic said 6 patients nationwide have died. 2 were Hakamovich's own patients, 4 others died at the hands of doctors who worked for his chain. One patient, a 15-year-old, died after an abortion performed by a doctor so ill that he himself died the day of her funeral. The newspaper also cited, for example, problems at one of Hakamovich's New York City clinics. In 1986, Luz Marie Rodriguez, who was 8 to 10 weeks pregnant, died from complications at his Bronx clinic. Right before she was to be discharged, Rodriguez, 40, started turning blue from lack of oxygen. CPR was performed and paramedics were called. Rodriguez was taken by ambulance to a hospital where she remained in a coma for 4 days until her death. A medical malpractice review found that the doctor had not removed all of the contents of Ms. Rodriguez's womb. While Hakamovich was fighting to protect his license in New York, he was spending years cleaning up legal messes in his now-defunct clinics in Dallas, Houston, and San Antonio. Hakamovich, who still operates clinics in the Bronx and Long Island, refused to comment. I read that simply so you appreciate who it is that your statute offers a private right of action to. I thank you.
I just have 2 questions for you, if you have a second. What private right of action are you referring to?
There is a civil injunction provision that would allow the owner of the clinic to sue anyone who he or she apparently feels annoyed or harassed by. I believe that's the word of the statute. It does not allow for civil damages, but it allows for a private right of action for injunction, and that's certainly...
You're not talking about the civil actions that were brought against this doctor for malpractice?
No, I'm talking about the fact that this board would purport to give the clinic owner, in this case it would have been Dr. Hakamovich in White Plains at the time, a civil right of action against somebody standing outside the sidewalk.
Injunction action. Right.
Which would be expensive.
Second question I have is, we also have a proposal to enact a local law which prohibits persons from demonstrating within 500 feet of funerals. Would you be in favor of that?
No. I think what they do at those funerals is an absolute tragedy, but I believe the Supreme Court has addressed the issue.
So you wouldn't be in favor of that law either?
No, I wouldn't.
Thanks, Mr. Murtaugh. Appreciate it.